who are unable to meet in person. Please keep an eye on our website and Facebook page for announcements for future sessions as we work our way through Watershed Wednesdays Phase 2. Now to introduce our speaker. A long-standing interest in nature and animals led Jeff O'Hanley to a degree in wildlife management from Cook College, Rutgers University. After a summer job at a local natural history museum, O'Hanley discovered a love for environmental education and has been doing it ever since. Jeff joined OCCA in August 2013 and is responsible for OCCA's education, recycling, and invasive species programs. All right, take it away, Jeff.
Thanks very much, Melissa, and thank you everybody for coming out this morning and spending some time with us. I will try not to talk too long. Our topic today is a hands-on approach to aquatic invasive species. Since 2005, OCCA has taken a hands-on approach, in particular with water chestnut infestation. So what we'll do today is kind of cover that project. We'll talk a little bit about what it is we've done, successes and failures, and cover some of the pros and cons of this approach. And so we'll go from there. And just as Melissa covered, I think the only thing that surprises me more than the fact that I've been in environmental education for 30 plus years now is the fact that I ever got into it in the first place, because coming through high school and college, I could not stand speaking in front of people, and go figure, right? So there's me getting hands-on. One of the nice things about education is that you get to learn a lot about a lot of different things, and that you get to work with people. I do enjoy working with people. So just real quick about who OCCA is, Otsego County Conservation Association. We're a private nonprofit organization that was founded in 1968. Originally founded by a group of citizens who were primarily concerned with sustainable forestry issues. But as is typical for nonprofit organizations, the mission grew and changed over time based in part on the needs of the community, as well as the interests of the folks, running the organization, working for the organization. So, we cover a lot of topics right now, including municipal planning, energy, solid waste, and of course, I would say education. That education is part of everything we do. But then again, I'm also biased. So because I've only been with OCCA really since 2013, although I have been involved with them for probably 7 or 8 years before that in other capacities, I don't know all of the history. So I was going back through some of our old newsletters and some of our records, and the first real mention I found of invasive species was in one of our newsletters from back in 1982, a warning right on the front page about water chestnut, and calling attention to this plant that was had been in New York State for probably 100 years or so at this point, but was certainly becoming more noticeable in the Hudson and Champlain valleys, and according to the article, was kind of working its way out towards the Finger Lakes region. So OCCA was trying to call public attention to this. And one of the things that the organization did was to start organizing volunteers. And this originally took place in the form of a once-a-year water chestnut day. And the idea was to organize as many people in canoes or boats, kayaks, whatnot, and try to cover really the entire lake looking for water chestnut. Well, great news, none found. So everybody was happy. Now, I will say one thing about OCCA is at times we have been accused of being a little Otsego Lake centric and a little Cooperstown centric once we kind of moved our offices here. So, some people would say that what happened next was kind of inevitable. The bad news is that Otsego Lake didn't get the water chestnuts, but Goodyear Lake did. So an infestation of water chestnut was found on Goodyear Lake. So for those of you who may not be familiar with Goodyear Lake, it is located in the town of Milford. It is about 366 acres and a human-made lake. It was created in 1907, and I got to be very careful when I try to drag my cursor around the screen because I always end up advancing the slides. But it was created by damming the Susquehanna River down here at Colliersville. And I think most of us, I know I do this a lot, I tend to think of Goodyear Lake as being this sort of blob here. I always think it looks sort of like a stomach. But officially, the lake runs all the way up to where County Road 35A crosses the river at Portlandville. Okay, so it's about 2 miles long, give or take, and it includes this little pouch of water up here. See, there we go. Average depth of the lake is about 14 feet. It gets to 30 feet at its deepest point. Okay, and that area there is where the water chestnuts were found. Okay, that is a portion of Goodyear Lake known as the Stump Lot, called that because if you paddle over it, you look down in the water and you see a couple of feet below you tree stumps. It was probably an old bottomland forest or sort of swamp prior to the damming. And the Stump Lot is really perfect location for water chestnuts. It's only about 3 feet deep. It's really more like a big, 60-acre pond. Lots of water lilies, pickerel weed, a lot of, floating leaf vegetation and emergence, very warm water, still environment. So kind of a great place for water chestnut. So taking sort of a closer look at the Stump Lot, I actually have to move my Zoom stuff here a little bit because it's in the way. Excuse me. So I said this is about 60 acres or so in size. The original survey for water chestnut done in 2006 found it in these yellow blobbed areas. And the original estimates were it was about 5 acres. I said it covers about 5 acres. And that in some ways that kind of drove the move towards hand pulling because it certainly seemed manageable. And in 2006, Otsego County Conservation Association teamed up with the Goodyear Lake Association to conduct sort of a couple of, emergency hand pulls to hit these areas. Well, the next year when they went back out, they discovered that there was a lot more water chestnut than originally thought, that it covered, 25 plus acres, including large swaths through the middle of the Stump Lot, as well as alongside some shoreline areas. Actually, let me go back just 1 second to also mention that Goodyear Lake does have some public access sites. Right up here near Portlandville is a fishing access site where people have been launching canoes and kayaks for years. There's another launch down here at the bottom end of the lake. And then the lake more recently has been accessed by motorboats from the Crumhorn launch, which is a couple of miles up the river. Okay. Plus it's got a bustling community around it. You get a lot of summer people. So there's a lot of, watercraft, a lot of traffic on the lake where water chestnut could have come from. Okay. So this is part of what they were looking at. Okay, a pretty extensive water chestnut infestation that really covered large areas. So once water chestnut was found, there are really 4 options for it. One is to do nothing and just say, you know what, we're just going to let it go. That's really not an option. There were a lot of concerns that though this was located in that Stump Lot portion, there were fears that it would travel down into the main body of the lake proper. There were also concerns about it spreading further down in the Susquehanna system, and nobody really wanted to see that. So doing nothing was not an option. Second option would have been using mechanical harvesting methods, such as one of the boats. I used to work at Central Park in the city, and they would get those out on the lakes there every year to pull up algae. We thought of it as the weed whacker boat. There was also the option for herbicides, chemical herbicides, and then, of course, hand pulling. So the decision was ultimately made to hand pull, and in part, I think it was because it was seen initially as that 5 acres or so, but also there are a lot of concerns with the use of herbicides in particular, and their potential impact on non-target species and general health of the lake and the lake residents. The mechanical harvesting would not work in the Stump Lot because, again, it's only about 3 feet deep. There are some very shallow areas there, and they felt it would not be effective. So the plan was to go in and hand pull. Okay, so starting in 2007, the effort really began. It involved volunteers, large numbers of volunteers in canoes, kayaks, uh, small motorboats and John boats, getting out there, basically spending hours pulling, yanking the plants out, throwing them in a boat, and piling them on shore. And this is probably not the best way to do this. So one of the years, the town of Milford donated a dump truck to haul the material away, and it was filled pretty easily and pretty quickly. Over the years, the kind of the practices surrounding how to dispose of this material has changed. At one point over at Portlandville fishing site, we were told to leave it by the edge of the parking lot, and DEC would pick it up, which they sometimes did. We currently take the material that we collect and we bring it to a compost facility where it is safely disposed of. So how'd we do? And what'd we do? How'd we do? There's some of our happy volunteers. The results were overall pretty good between 2006 and we've been at this for a long time, basically 15 years. We have had 90 plus hand pulling events. And some of the data here is a little bit fudgy because there are a couple of years where I couldn't really find records. I'm not quite sure why, but 90 plus hand pulling events, close to 100. Over that time, we've contacted and had more than around 500 volunteers involved in this project, some who came back again and again, some who were there just once. And nearly 30 tons of water chestnut removed from the lake over that time. So a lot of plant material hauled out. Okay? This had a very visible impact on the lake. So here we go again, back in 2006, this photo. A couple of years ago, I was out on the lake and I snapped a picture and then looked back at it and said, oh, wow, I got a photo from that almost same spot. And this is what we saw in 2018. And this is not after a pull. This is not after spending, a weekend with volunteers out there cleaning it out. This was, while looking. Okay, so it's similar vantage point, similar spot on the lake, no water chestnut. So again, visible impact, visible positive impact. The weight of the material went from, pulling tons, 24,000 pounds in the first year, which included 10,000 pounds on a single day, to 45 pounds in 2017. Okay, so that was it. The sum total of our efforts in 2017, we pulled about 45 pounds. So that's great, down from 12 tons in 2017. But you notice there's a but there, and here is the trend. In 2018, we were back up to about 200 pounds. 2019, 325 pounds. And then this year, 745 pounds. So we're looking at a situation here where, the numbers are trending back up in the lake, and that's not something we like to see. I'll also add that this year, on our last pull, in addition to getting that, 700 pounds, we found a patch kind of creeping down the channel toward the lake proper that we got, that we cleaned out. So, we don't like to see those numbers. Okay. Also of something of note is that in 2006, there were 2 reported sites for water chestnut in Otsego County. One was here at Goodyear Lake, and the other was at a wetland in Oneonta. And unfortunately now, in 2020, we're up to 9 different sites with known water chestnut infestations. Okay. Now, part of that is because there's greater awareness. People are looking for it, and OCCA got a grant for early detection, so we've been out looking for the plant in other places, and unfortunately, we are finding it. Okay, so but what happened? Why are we seeing those numbers go up, at least in Goodyear Lake? Here's number one: is declining volunteer interest. We went from about 250 volunteers in the first 3 years to just 60 over the last 3. Right, so we're seeing lower turnout in terms of our participation. Okay, we were able to, in those first few years, we were able to get a lot of lake residents and a lot of Goodyear Lake Association people out on the lake. And really, I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that after a few years, it's no longer a crisis, right? In 2006, if you paddled up into the Stump Lot, you'd see, that wall of water chestnut. And in 2020, you paddle up there and it's like, oh, there's one, there's a small patch, maybe 5 feet across. So once you're past that crisis point, it's natural for people to kind of turn their attention elsewhere. Okay. Second, also, shifting priorities, and that goes for OCCA as well as the Lake Association. OCCA is a small group. We have 3 full-time staff. So it's hard to, focus on one thing for long periods of time. I will admit it. And the same with the Lake Association. Some of their priorities shifted to other areas. Okay. There's also declining funds. So, we had a 5-year grant from DEC very specifically for this project from 2007 to 2011. Many of you would probably be aware that it becomes a lot harder to get funds from people to do what you're already doing, right? Everybody wants to fund something new. They say, wait, what's a new project? We don't want to carry that old thing. And this also included, one of the things that we would do is a direct appeal to Goodyear Lake residents, and we started to see declines in money for that. And you know what? We'll take the hard look. Complacency is definitely an issue. And this goes for everybody. This goes for us as well. That when you spend in a 3-hour day on the lake, when you spend most of your time paddling and looking and, very little of it pulling, you start to think, oh yeah, we got this under control. It's fine. It's fine. We're in maintenance mode now, and we don't have to put as much effort into it. Those first 3 years, we did average about 15 events per year. And over the last 3, we were down to more like 3 per year. Okay. And so that's part complacency, part thinking we don't need to do it as much, but also partly a result of shifting priorities and having to direct our attention to other things, which includes detection in other lakes and responding to those. Okay, so there's part of that warts and all. Okay, but I do want to talk a little bit now about some of the pros and cons of hand pulling. Is it something for you? 15 years is a long time to be doing this. What's good about it? What's maybe not so good? Pro of hand pulling is that it is pretty targeted. There's always going to be a little bit of collateral damage when you're pulling up plants. You're going to get some Elodea in there, some coontail, or, some of the milfoils and things, but it's not like when you're running one of the weed harvester boats, which is really pulling up everything in front of it. And less likelihood of collateral damage than you might have from some of the herbicides. Okay, so it allows you to be very, very focused, and you can also get into smaller areas, smaller infestation areas, and clean those out pretty well. Okay, second thing is public perception. Right or wrong, a lot of people have very negative reactions to herbicides, particularly around water. And so if you can say, hey, we're going to go in and hand pull this and, no environmental damage, no herbicides, people tend to like that. It makes you look good. Like I said, it's not always the right answer. There are some cases where the herbicides are necessary and are the best option. But where you can pull can do hand pulling instead, people do like that. Okay. Moving on to pros, it's an educational opportunity. Like I said, this is my bias showing. In addition to raising awareness of the problem specifically with water chestnut and invasives in general with members of the lake community, members of the wider community, and your volunteers, when we're out on the water, we do a lot of education. People will be paddling by on a paddle board, or they're out fishing and they see us pulling out these plants, and they stop and say, what are you doing? So it gives us an opportunity to educate them and promote what we're doing, and also promote good boating practices, clean, drain, and treat your boat, and inspections, etc. Community involvement is big. People do like to get out on the water, for example. We don't just get lake residents, we get other people who want to be involved. They want to help out. So in addition to getting people involved with the resource, you're also getting people involved with your organization. So you're raising your profile, and again, you're educating about your organization as well. You're getting people involved in your organization. You might get kids like this one who end up becoming interns or employees, or, encouraging them to go into a career in natural sciences, for example. Okay, and you might end up getting, if you're an organization that relies on memberships and donations, this is a good way to get people involved with you and potentially increase those areas. Okay, it's also all ages, right? We've had scout groups and small children. We have college students, high school students. We've had older people like me. So it gets a lot of people out there, and it involves all kinds of people. It's healthy as well, important in this time. And I guess I should also add that in this time, it's also something you can socially distance. You just need to be careful. But you can get people out on the water socially distanced, and it's fun. It is fun to get out on the water with other people and to do this work. Okay. There are cons. There are some downsides to it. This young fella is not one of the downsides, actually. He was a good worker, despite being 5 years old or so at the time. But there are some cons. Biggest one is time. Right. And we're talking about time on the individual event scale, as well as time in organizational commitment. So if we're doing a 3-hour pull at Goodyear Lake on a Saturday, you say it's only 3 hours, but for me, it basically becomes an all-day thing. We have to go, I have to go and get our canoes ready and get our equipment ready and bring them down to the site. We do the pull. Then it's back the other way, load everything up, bring it back, unload the water chestnuts, clean everything off, put everything away, right? So it becomes a full day. And it's time commitment because, as we know, invasive species are not something you can conquer overnight. Water chestnut in particular has a nut that can survive in the sediments for, I've heard up to a dozen years. So, some of the plants that we're pulling this year may have sprouted from seeds that were dropped 10 years ago, right? So that it's going to take a long period of time, right? Time and labor intensive. But, even with herbicides, it's not a one and done thing. With mechanical harvesting, it's not a one and done thing. You have to put in time with monitoring and potentially going back and treating it again. Okay. As we mentioned before, maintaining interest can be a challenge. Once you start reporting success, or once people are out there on their own, or they come out with you and spend 3 hours paddling around in circles, if they're not pullings, they can lose interest and potentially not want to come back and help out again, right? And so that's definitely a challenge, maintaining the interest and attention of people. Okay. Third, it can be expensive. We invested a lot of money in canoes and a trailer and equipment. I'm trying to remember what that original investment was, $10,000 or $12,000 or something. Time every year is oh gosh, I can't remember how much in salary time goes into it every year. Potential for liability insurance. Our canoe fleet is aging at this point and needs repairs, or in some cases outright replacement. So, it can be an expensive proposition, right? So that is definitely something that you need to consider. And last, and again, I would say that we are kind of guilty of this, is you can't slip up, right? If you have a year where you just don't get out as often, you can potentially lose a lot of ground to those water chestnuts or whatever invasive that you are working on. Okay. And that is definitely something you need to be aware of. Okay. And I think that's it. I said thank you for that. I guess for us, what we would look at going forward, again, is always trying to diversify our funding and find creative ways to fund what we already do, so that we can continue doing these things, roll them into other programs, and then look for ways to message differently to keep people coming back. And that's something we have to work on. And I will open this up to questions if anybody has any questions right now. But I thank you first for your time, and I hope you found this useful in some way.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeff. Folks, you're welcome to put your questions in the chat. We're a relatively small group. We should be able to open people up to ask. Julian, it looks like you're unmuted. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I do. How do you get up the, just physically, I'm curious, how do you pull them up? Do you have to get out of the boat or?
That depends. Usually you can just kind of lean over and reach into the water. You know, I don't know how familiar you are with water chestnut, the plant, but
I'm not.
okay. It has a long stem. So, you know, we tend to, you know, what you want to try to do is pull it up without breaking it. And, you know, we kind of wrap it around our hand as we go, like twirling spaghetti, and just, you know, pull. And then we, you know, we'll throw it in the boat, you know, and store it in the boat with us until we are unloading on shore. Okay. Now there are some cases, particularly when we're working in canoes, you know, kayaks give you a little more freedom to get into some shallow areas, but we have had people that, you know, on some of the muddy areas where the canoe gets stuck, they've gotten out and waded and pulled that way, which can be pretty effective too. But you got to watch out that you don't sink in up to your knees.
I'll just make the comment that one of my colleagues, John Titus, just located the first trap I've heard of in Broome County.
Oh boy.
In one of our parks.
Yeah. And, you know, I think I will say that this is one other thing that, you know, we've spent, as I said, you know, 15 years working here in Goodyear Lake on this, and, you know, recognize that, you know, we, you know, lost a little ground here. But you can feel good about the difference from what we started with. But it is discouraging sometimes to go, like, you know, I showed you the map where, you know, now there are 9 locations in Otsego County where we have water chestnuts, and you say, you know, we're working so hard here and we're getting this thing under control, and it's turning up elsewhere, you know, and it's tough.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Jeff, we have another question that came in the chat.
Okay.
What time of year do you usually harvest?
We typically harvest from late June through August. It's funny because, you know, I've been out there sometimes in early June and the plants are really small and sometimes haven't quite gotten all the way to the surface. I see, you know, in the Hudson Valley, sometimes they're out there in May or early June, and which seems really early for us. You know, the growth of the plants does seem to be dependent on temperature a little bit, I think. This year they seemed to grow, like we had a crummy spring, but once we were out of spring, these things grew fast. And I know we got out and did a pull out, and, you know, Amy, you were there. We did a pull in Goodyear Lake in early June, and the plants were very, very small and kind of underdeveloped. And then about a week and a half later, we went out to Silver Lake in New Berlin, and those plants were surprisingly large. I think the water was warmer out there or something. I'm not entirely sure, but you know, we will typically start in middle or late June. We do find that once you get into August, when the nuts start developing, it does become a little harder to pull because they're spiky. And if my experience has been, once you get into late August, the plants start falling apart a little bit and they're harder to pull without dislodging nuts. So we concentrate it mostly between, you know, mid-June and early August.
Awesome. And just for everyone, if you're interested, I put a link to a previous YouTube video that was actually done by our summer intern, our invasive species intern. She did a fabulous job. It's about a lot of aquatic invasives. The section on water chestnut kind of starts at the 7-minute mark. So feel free if you'd like to get some more information.
Yep.
Earlier, before we got started, we did have someone who had a question about a nuisance plant.
Okay.
So I don't know, Joe, are you available? Did you call in to be able to ask your question auditory? All right.
Do we know what we don't know what the question was.
The question, it was a question around water shield, but I don't know the exact question. So that's why I just wanted to check back with Joe to see if, yeah.
Okay. I don't know much about water shield. I do believe that is a potentially emerging threat to the area. I'm not sure if it's been found in Otsego County or not. I'm not super familiar with it.
All right. Well, Joe did say that he's still there, but the microphone's not working. So
Okay.
no worries.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Were there any other questions, folks? We are right at 10 o'clock. Oh, here's one from Jamie. Does OCCA have signs or check stations for watercraft specifically to water chestnut?
Good question. Actually, we don't run water, boat inspection stations. DEC has funded those, and they're currently run by through the Catskill Regional Invasive Species Program partnership, Watershed Steward Program. So they have a number of inspection stations, including some at newer locations throughout the region. They actually did put one. I think they started last year at the Portlandville launch. So we do work with them a bit and coordinate with them. They are definitely, and I know that one of the stewards at Cooperstown several years ago actually did intercept water chestnut on a boat that was coming in. So they're doing their job. They're working. OCCA did work for several years to help fund the boat inspection programs in Cooperstown, Springfield, and over at Canandaigua Lake as well. So we're familiar with it, and we've definitely helped out. And we encourage you, if you're getting out on the water, to stop in and talk to the people, talk to the folks there doing those jobs, and cooperate fully.
Very good. Well, thank you everybody so much for joining us. And I am not just the talking person behind this is Amy from OCCA. I'm the executive director over here. And I wanted to invite you all to please feel free to join us next week. It'll be Watershed almost Wednesday. Because of the holiday, we will be getting together on Thursday morning at 9:30. And it's going to be a very interesting program on fish patchages by Jeff Parker. We're very excited to hear about it, and we hope that you can join us then. Thank you so much. The recording of this video will be available on our YouTube channel, also through the USC. They will be sharing the video as well. So if you want to share this information with others, feel free to get the word out. But thank you again. And Melissa, anything else you wanted to add?
No, I'm all set. Thank you, Jeff. It was a great presentation.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.